Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. So we are meeting after a long time. As you all know, we completed 11 verses of the chapter 13, which is also named as Kshetrajna Yoga. So, as we have discussed so many times, the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, is divided into 18 chapters, and each one teaches of Brahma Jnana. So, it is also known as Brahma Vidya, and also it teaches us about the yoga or the means to attain. So, it's also known as Yoga Shastra. So, at the end of every verse, end of every chapter, there is a verse which describes the yoga, that particular yoga, Purushottama yoga. Then we have this as Kshetrajna yoga. So, yoga here in means, in each of these chapters, a means by which you can understand the highest reality, or the means or the pathway through which you attain the highest Brahma Jnana. So, though it is Brahma Vidya, there should be some means to attain it, and that is yoga. And there are different yogas, though broadly speaking, depending on the constitution of our mind, which has four basic powers, three according to Western psychology and four according to Indian psychology. The three powers being thinking, feeling, and willing, the willpower that converts our ideas into actions, concrete actions. So, just ideas will not help. Those ideas, those thoughts, when it is directed by the force or power of the willpower, by the will, which is one of the faculties of the mind, it gets converted into concrete action. So, that is why in Western psychology, they describe the human mind as being constituted by, broadly speaking, by three powers: the power to think, cognition; the power to feel, emotion; and the power to will or convert that emotion or cognition into concrete action. So, when the will comes into the function of the will is to convert mere thoughts which are normally frozen in the brain, to bring them out and convert them into some action. So, that is done by the power of will. So, three powers are normally associated with three primary yogas. According to Gita, of course, there are 18 yogas because each chapter is a yoga in itself. But if we classify it into four was the classification popularized by Swami Vivekananda, because he spoke of four yogas. But very often you speak of three yogas corresponding to the three powers of the mind. And the fourth yoga is something which combines all the three. So the three yogas, the yoga of knowledge, or yoga where cognition, through the faculty of cognition which is there in the mind, by thinking, by analyzing, by power of discrimination, we come to a conclusion. And our idea of reality, whatever be the idea or goal which we uh, wish to attain, we attain through the power of knowledge, that is known as Jnana Yoga. If we use, there's another power in the mind, human mind, which is the power of emotion. If we use that to attain the same goal, maybe the goal is defined in different ways, but ultimately the paths may be different, but the goal is the same: to reach that uh, entity, or not entity, you can say that state, which is known as Brahman, or the eternal, immortal self. That is the goal of Jnana Yoga. And that same immortal self when it is an immanent reality, the transcendent reality appearing as immanent reality, we call it bhakti. So there is a personal God there. But when we reach that through devotion, through the power of emotion, through emotional attachment to that highest, most desirable, most loving being, when we reach or when we try through bhakti yoga to reach that reality, ultimately we come face to face with the knowledge that the same reality expresses itself as the transcendent as well as the immanent being that we see around us. So that is the second aspect of the mind which we use, which is another yoga which is known as bhakti yoga. So we have jnana yoga, which is a result of using the powers of the mind, the cognitive powers of the mind, to reach truth or immortality. The same power of the mind, not the same power, the power of the mind which is described as the emotional powers. So there is a power of feeling, thinking, feeling, and then it comes to the third, we come to the third aspect of the mind, which is willing. That is, human beings have a tendency to convert thoughts and feelings into concrete actions. So if you see the Gita, there is Karma Yoga. Some chapters are described as Bhakti Yoga, the 12th chapter which we saw. So different yogas use different aspects of the mind to reach the same goal. So what is the goal? Has the goal been defined? So in this Kshetragna Yoga, that is another way which uses discrimination, which is somewhat connected to the power of thinking or analysis or cognition, which is known as Jnana Yoga. An attempt is made in the 13th chapter. In the first 11 verses, we saw Sri Krishna defining the concept of Kshetra and Kshetragna. That means the field and the knower of the field. Field means the manifest universe, the Prakriti, as it is known as in Sankhya, the nature that we see around us. So that is the manifest universe. So it is the Kshetra. Kshetra means the field, where the Kshetragna acts. Kshetragna means one who, Gna means one who knows. One is the knower of the field, the conscious entity behind the unconscious Prakriti. Unconscious or inert Prakriti. Unconscious is a wrong word. It's known as inert. Inert in the sense it is, the Sanskrit word is jada. Jada means it has no reality of its own, but it appears as a reality because of the consciousness behind it. So, to put it briefly, it is known as Kshetragna Yoga. So then Sri Krishna tries to define what Kshetra is, what Kshetra will not repeat. But we'll come to the conclusion, which has been nicely described at the end of the 11th verse. 12th verse is beyond both the reality which knowledge of both Kshetra and Kshetragna, knowledge of Purusha and Prakriti, knowledge of Shakti and Shiva, knowledge of Brahman and Maya. So the idea to go beyond comes only if you know the two entities which are apparently one, but they'll appear as two. So that is what Brahma Jnana is all about. But Sri Krishna in the 12th verse, for the first time, he defines what is this idea of Brahma Jnana and what is the utility of that knowledge. So he's trying to describe in the 13th chapter through the concept of Kshetra Kshetragna, knower and the knower of the field, subject and the object. So obviously when there are two, there is a subject or a principle of consciousness which percolates through the object and making the object and subject different from each other. Now, Sri Ramakrishna in his own non-philosophical or in through parables, like all the great prophets before him, all the great teachers of the world, they did not confuse the mind with lot of philosophical words. They just gave concrete examples which we see in front of us in nature itself. Nature itself gives us a hint how these intricate concepts of Kshetra and Kshetrajna can be explained. So we see them, but it requires the power of intuition, like Sri Ramakrishna, Buddha, Jesus. They all spoke through parables. They knew it is these examples can substitute the need for discussing philosophy, complex philosophy, which is very difficult for the ordinary minds. But though these principles are very simple, the examples they give are very simple. Swami Vivekananda once said, if you take one parable of Sri Ramakrishna, I can speak on it for 3 days continuously. And he actually demonstrated that. He gave many simple examples. See, here he is giving one example where the concept of Brahman and Maya, which has been discussed elaborately in the Advaita philosophy of Shankara. So many books have to be read even to get an inkling of what Maya is. But here he just gives an example. And if one meditates on this, one can get not an intuitive knowledge, but at least some idea of what this Brahma Jnana does or what Brahman actually means and how it appears to be what it is not. So he says, how is that? That is, he's putting a question. An atheist or a curious inquirer may ask the question that we speak of Ishvara, the all-ruling, almighty God. Everybody in every religion, especially Semitic religion, we call him a ruler, all-knowing, all-powerful. But how is he manifest through this whole creation? And if he is manifest, why don't we see it? Why do we see things as changing, transient, powerless? When you say he is all-powerful, he is all-knowing, why do we see people with limited understanding? We see things in a very limited way. So he says, he gives an example. This is the best we can do, Sri Ramakrishna says, to give you an idea of how Maya and Brahman can coexist. So he gives an example which is very close to him. In Bengal, if you go, you'll find most of the ponds, if you go there, unless you go there, you don't get this idea. It's not seen everywhere. There is a pond, most of the ponds are covered with moss. And they are so thick that it appears as if it is a lawn or something, unless you step into it. So he says, standing by the side of a pond, Sri Ramakrishna says in his gospel, which is covered with moss and reeds, one feels inclined to think that there is no water in it. And one may even step on it if he is not familiar with that. But the moss has to be pushed aside to see the water below. Similarly, Maya, with her concealing power, has to be brushed aside from our mind. So he's explaining how reality can be seen and why in the first place it is covered. It is covered by Maya. So explaining Maya in such simple terms, he says this water is all pervading. But when you separate that little portion, we remove the moss, of course it comes back. If you allow it, it has a tendency to cover it again. But for the time being, when somebody enters water, they want to take fresh water, they want to collect in a pot, most of the women will just push the moss aside, take the fresh water, and then slowly you'll find that portion is again covered. So that concealing power has to be brushed aside from our mind. So you see, it is the mind which is responsible for concealing the true nature, the Kshetrajna from the Kshetra. Kshetra means the field. As you know, the Kshetra was defined as the Indriya, as the mind, which is also one of the Indriyas because it makes all the inputs, sensory inputs, which we get through the eyes, nose, and all the sense organs. It makes some sense out of it. The mind coordinates everything. It is like a processor. It processes everything and presents it before the soul, before the Kshetrajna, who then observes it. So similarly, this Maya, with its concealing power, which is a property of the mind again. So it's a mixture of unreal and real, asat and sat. So these two words you just remember because it will come in the next verse. I just recapitulated what we discussed in the first 11 verses, where Krishna tells Arjuna how to distinguish between what you see as the changing universe and what you see as that which is observing the changing universe itself, which is unchanging. So the Kshetrajna, the observer, never changes. But it's when the observer identifies himself with the observed, that is the moss that is covering. Maya conceals the reality of Brahman, and that concealing is done in the mind. So Sri Ramakrishna says it has to be brushed from our mind. It is the mind that is involved in concealing as well as revealing. So that is why there is a beautiful verse in the Upanishad which says, Mana eva karanam manushyanam bandha mokshayo, for bondage or for covering, for concealing, as well as for revealing the truth. The cause is the mind. So mind is that which we deal with, either to understand things in the realm of Maya or to remove Maya and see the things as they are. So there are two efforts. One is the concealing power, another is the revealing power. So the all pervading Ishvara can be intuitively understood only if the moss of Maya or the Maya's concealing power is removed. So this can be done through Brahma Jnana, the Jnana, the knowledge of the Kshetrajna, as opposed to the knowledge of the Kshetra. But first we have to know both, because we have to know how this concealing power has clouded the mind so that we don't see the clear water which is below. So how that takes place, if it has already taken place, what is the way to remove that ignorance and have the vision of the ultimate? And then what good will it do to me? That is one of the most important things, because without any benefit, no fool would undertake any endeavor. Because if the goal is fixed, if your goal is to make money, and if something that you do will not give you money, you will not go after it. It is common sense. So what good comes for a person who is very keen, whose the goal of life is to earn money? If he is asked to follow some pursuit which does not give him money, he'll just brush it aside. So also, when you come to spirituality, if Sri Krishna knows, all the prophets and all the teachers of the world know, they have to explain the if any good comes out of this Brahma Jnana. Otherwise, why should I spend all my time reading the Gita or the Upanishads if it is worth pursuing or not? That has to be understood. And that for that, you have to define it. If you don't know the goal, if you know the goal that I want to achieve this target through my effort, so you want to become a billionaire or maybe several billions. So if you have a target, then you will put all the efforts. So you should know what is the goal and what good will come. The efforts that I do, will it lead me to the goal? If you are convinced, then only you will follow certain principles. So it is very important in the 12th verse, Brahma Jnana has been defined. It's very difficult to define because it's a very complex thing, but Sri Krishna is trying to answer at least one question: what good will come from Brahma Jnana? So the verse says, Geyam yat tat, yat tat, Gneyam yat tat, pravakshami, yat gyatva amrutam ashnute, anadi anadi mat param brahma, na sat tat, na asat uchyate. Now this is a very difficult to understand. It is neither sat or asat. That's why I explained to you what sat and asat are. We'll come to that. Gneyam means it has to be known. It has to be known what that yat which which that which I am declaring now. It has to be known means what I am declaring now has to be known. Knowing which, now what is the benefit of I can say that this Brahma Jnana should be attained. So, what is the purpose and what will it do to you? Knowing which Amrutam, immortality, one attains to. Ashnute means one attains to immortality. Now, no matter which religion one belongs to, one of the primary reasons why people follow religion or spirituality, though there are other reasons, Sri Krishna has mentioned it, people come to religion for four purposes, he says. The last purpose is the best and the real purpose, but three other types of categories of people also approach religion or spirituality. For one is Artha Arthi. Artha means one who wants money, and Arti means one who is suffering. So there are two reasons. If you need something and you think, if a person thinks that it is not possible through human effort, then he goes to God. That's one of the most popular reasons why people go to God, because they want certain things which they cannot acquire with their own human effort. And because they have a belief that God is all powerful, all supreme, they somehow believe, or they convince their mind to believe that by praying to God we will get these things. So that is one type of people who wants to possess things which they feel they need or they don't have and they desire. That is one, people who are desirous of some benefits. That is one category of people. They go to religion, definitely. Then there is another category who go to God or who go to who follow spiritual pursuit or pray to God only when they are in trouble. That's why I said Kunti knew this psychological trick. So she told Krishna that, please always give me trouble. It's an exception. Nobody does that. Nobody prays. People would rather pay for good things from God rather than ask for trouble. But she was a peculiar devotee. She knew that just for good things, uh, once you get that, you may forget God. So as long as you don't get it, but when you get what you have asked, then there is a tendency to forget God. But one who is troubled, one who is in deep distress, he also follows God, and that is slightly better in according to Kunti. That's why she prays to Krishna, said because everybody used to tell her, you are so close to Krishna and he has never spared you from any trouble. Right from day one, your husband died, your children went away into the forest, and now after coming back, they are not getting back their kingdom. There is the war. You have to see your children being dead, being either the risk of them being killed or they killing the cousins. Such a horrible life, Sri Krishna. She said, God has always put you into trouble. You are never free from worries. So she says, no, that is exactly what I prayed for. Because if I know that my problems have been solved, if the day I don't have trouble, I'll not call upon God. So that is a very logical argument. Though nobody will ask God for trouble, just so that she can remember him. She can remember him. Says, if I am in trouble, then I have nowhere else to go, and then I'll go come to you. So I'll always be in touch with you. I'd rather have that kind of devotion. So the second category, as I said, when there is trouble, we go to God. But there is another one who go out of curiosity. So, and then the real ones who just want to become immortal. Why immortal? Because all religions basically were born out of a helplessness, knowing fully well that whatever we might do, however rich we might be, however poor we might be, everything will end with death. So, immortality is one of the most important goals which has motivated people to search for it if it is possible to get immortality. So, mumukshutvam, and that means freedom, freedom from wants, freedom from desires, is only, that's the only motive. The only motive for that is to become immortal. So, Krishna knows this. Nobody in his right sense of mind wants to die. Nobody wants to die, though it is a truth. In fact, Yudhishthira, when he one of the Yaksha Prashnas, when he goes, the Yaksha asks him, what is the most surprising thing that you see in life? He says, every day we see people dying, and yet we feel that we are going to live eternally. So that desire to live eternally, or that desire to attain Amrutam or immortality, is a very important motive which makes people follow religion. So, of the different motives he can have, there can be lesser motives. There's no denying the fact that a majority of the people will go to God to ask Him for something, to pray for something that they can't get. Some others may go to Him, or often go to Him when there is trouble, so that they know we cannot get rid of our tribulations and trials. So if somehow by praying to God we can get rid of it, that is also another motive. But ultimately, the wisest people are they who realize that whatever I do, one day I'll have to die. So that is a meditation which Swami Vivekananda surprisingly told a group of young people who are very patriotic, and they expected Swamiji to inspire them. So this young group came. They were full of energy. They were full of idea of revolution and trying to die for India's freedom. So Swami Vivekananda knew that it is not so easy to accept the fact that one is going to die. So he tells them, they expected that he will teach them some philosophy of the Gita or something. But he told them something which shocked them because they were young people. So he said, can you meditate on death? They wanted some kind of practical advice. What should we do to become spiritually empowered, or at least empower ourselves to fight for Indian freedom? So they were all very much motivated, thinking that here is an inspiring leader uh, who has practically conquered the world with his ideas. He has traveled everywhere. He was received with respect, and he comes and tells us something which they thought would make them depressed. He said, what kind of advice is this? He said, all you have to do is, if you want some advice, I can give you. Just think of death. Meditate on death. So they said, what kind of idea is this? You are making us pessimistic. Everybody knows that one is going to die. You should not be thinking of death right now. We are all very young. Obviously, that was the thought in their mind. And why should I think of death when I'm hale and hearty? I'm fit now. Maybe in old age I might be. There is no other way, and I'll start thinking of death. But why should I do it now? Will it not lead to depression? One of them asked. Will it not lead to a depressive attitude? Why are you so pessimistic? We thought we will be giving us some positive philosophy of life. So he says, if you persist, he says, in fact, this is the whole essence of religion or spirituality. Those people who persist, he says, in the beginning, yes, you may get depressed. But thinking of mortality, of thinking of death always, will kindle a desire of immortality, amrutatvam. Amrutam ashnute, one attains or one aspires to attain for that immortality. So religion is a response to nature, which is always telling you that everything is mortal. Everything that you do is mortal. It's a very depressive thought, no doubt, he says, but when you accept death as an inevitable fact, which Yudhishthira answered, and he was spared, because when he gave that answer, the Yaksha was very happy. He said, you are the first one who's saying that every day you see people dying before you, older people dying, younger people dying, and yet you have a strange feeling that you are immortal. Is that not a surprising thing? So that is exactly what the psychological conclusion that Sri Krishna says, I declare this. This is to be known. This has to be known. Neyam yat tat pravakshami. I am telling you that which should be known before you die at least. And I declare that, knowing that, he's declaring, is not just giving a suggestion to Arjuna. He says, Gyatva, by knowing this means whatever will follow now, 13th, 14th verses, one attains to Anadimat. Anadimat means the beginning, beginningless. That is when what is immortality? That which does not have a beginning, that which does not have an end. So that is why Swami Akhandananda, one of the presidents of the order, when he was asked to write a few lines when they were celebrating the centenary of Sri Ramakrishna in 1836, he was in Sargachi, and he was asked. In fact, Vijnananji himself went and said, "Please give me write a few words. You are the president of the order. You have to write some words uh, explaining the glory of Sri Ramakrishna on his birth anniversary." As soon as they said birth anniversary, he said, "No, I'm not going to write." Then they were shocked. You are his disciple. You are the president of the order, and if you don't write, yours will be the most authentic words describing him. He said, "No, I can write something on him, but not for his birthday." He said, "Because I consider Sri Ramakrishna to be the eternal, immortal self, the immortal being. And to say that he has a death or he has a birth, he was born and such a, that is, his body was born. And so I cannot attribute mortality or centenary, that is 100 years after his passing away, to somebody who is Amrutam Ashnute, one who attains to that Amrutam. And he has attained that. I firmly believe that he has touched immortality. So it would be an insult to write something about 100 years or even 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. So I will not write." But afterwards, Sri Ramakrishna himself appeared and said, "Why don't you write a few lines?" And then he agreed and he wrote. But that is the idea, that if you consider that this teaching, the Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga, that discriminating between Kshetra and Kshetrajna, will give a knowledge which will help you to attain, knowing that immortality, one attains to that immortality, Anadimat, which is beginningless, Param, Supreme, Brahma, Na Sat, Tat, Na Asat Uchate. It is not said to be Sat or Asat. This is very important. If you remember, we discussed in the uh, chapter 9. Chapter 9, just before we discussed the Vishwarupa Darshana, he showed his different forms, the different forms of meditation on the glories of the Lord, which will lead to the supreme goal. In that chapter before that, 9th, 10th, 11th, we discussed. In the 9th chapter, there the Lord has defined himself as both immortality and death, that he is Sat and is also Asat. Now, what is the significance of that? Because if he is Sat, how can he be Asat? That is why in the Vishwarupa Darshana, he says, "I am Kala, I am death." Kala means death. When the time comes to give up this gross body, it is known as Kala. They say that your Kala time is over. I mean, that is how they describe. Kala. Kala comes and devours everything. And then he shows in the Vishwarupa Darshana how time devours everything. So time is a measure of mortality, immortality. If you are immortal, then there is no beginning, no end. If there is a beginning and end, then you are Asat. That has been described as non-being or Asat. And Sat, he is immortality, but at the same time, like the moss in the river, he creates an impression of being Asat. So he is both the Nirguna Brahman or the Supreme Brahman, but also Saguna Brahman, which is immanent in Prakriti. He is there in Prakriti in a hidden way, and he shows as if he is Asat. But there it is said that he is both Sat and Asat. But here it is said that he is neither Sat nor Asat. That means he is neither Purusha nor Prakriti, is beyond. He is the Supreme Brahman. In that state means in the Brahma Vidya or the Brahma Jnana, the benefit is that all these contradictions will go. Good and evil. They are all in the Asat, the plane of Asat or the Prakriti. Prakriti shows the very nature or definition of Prakriti is it is temporary, it changes, and nothing is permanent in Prakriti. That which is born has to die. But imagine where the immanent Saguna Brahman on whom we meditate, it is all pervading, like the water in the covered by scum. We remove, and in a small portion we get a glimpse of that Brahman, but again it covers, and then we think it is the green scum that is there, the moss that is there on the top of the water layer. So both contradictions and conflicts, they meet in him, and in the relative existence, that is the temporary existence, which is not immortal. Even devas, the great devas, they also are not immortal. They are not immortal. They have a comparatively longer life than human beings. Devas, the Gandharvas, and all those things which we described, you saw the Vishwarupa. So his manifest aspects with all these three gunas is the Sat, and the unmanifest aspect in which all the three gunas disappear is known as Asat. But in the Nirguna Brahman, which is the goal which this chapter is speaking of, there is no modification of any kind. The manifest, the Vyakta Prakriti or the Avyakta Prakriti. That is why they say Prakriti, when it manifests, there is, when it is one with the Purusha, that is the Sankhya philosophy or even the Yoga philosophy, they believe in that Purusha and Prakriti are not separate. The Avyakta Prakriti, which has not manifest, is one with the Purusha, but when it separates, it appears to be separate. So this Nirguna Brahman, which is beyond, the state beyond both Asat and Sat, they do not apply to him. He is the pure consciousness, that is, he is the Kshetrajna, having neither a beginning nor an end. Whereas these Devas, they are immortal compared to human beings. They are beings which are imagined to be having certain powers in the universe, in the field of Prakriti, where they are relatively long, they live longer than us, but they are still not absolutely immortal. So only Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman, within the purview of Saguna Brahman, everything has a, they are not absolutely immortal, they are relatively immortal. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Supreme Samadhi, if one attains, that is known as Brahma Vidya, one who gets intuitively understands, not intellectually. Intellectually, we try to understand these concepts and we are satisfied. But that is not, we have to come face to face. So that is known as one who intuitively understands this Brahma Nirvana, gets merged in Brahman. That there is a beautiful example which Sri Ramakrishna gives. Again, he explains this difficult concept using the parable of a, or an example of a salt doll going to measure the depth of the ocean. So he says Akhanda Brahman or the indivisible Brahman or Kshetrajna can be experienced in Samadhi only. Because then there is nobody who can explain what he saw. How to explain this? He explains. He says, inquiry into the nature of this Purusha and Prakriti, knowledge and ignorance, all that is just a preparation for the end, the intuitive understanding. Only consciousness persists. There, the position of Jivatma is same that as that of a salt doll, incapable of surviving a sea bath. A salt doll, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, it's a very profound example. He says, a salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. But when it comes in contact with water, it started melting. Then who was there to tell? The salt doll could not come out to tell that the depth of the ocean because it got merged in the ocean. Similarly, this knowledge, Kshetrajna knowledge is necessary. But beyond the one who knows and beyond the ignorance which is covering it, is the Supreme Brahman, that is Akhanda Brahman. So, what is the experience that sadhaka enjoys before his merging in Brahman? The ocean of immortality. Now, when the salt doll completely melts, there is no question of whom will you ask what was your experience. But before that doll melts, Krishna is asking, or Krishna is telling in verse 13 to 15, when that wisdom when you are going towards Brahma Jnana, the ocean of immortality, what is the joy that the sadhaka feels? So these are all different states which he is trying to describe to Arjuna. In case you want to distinguish between Kshetra and Kshetrajna and go beyond them and reach, before reaching, say you have not reached that state where the salt doll has not merged or dissolved into the sea. So what will happen? So verse 13 to 15, 13, 14 and 15 describe that. So this is a beautiful verse which is a reflection of what we discussed in the Vishwarupa Darshana, where Sri Krishna gives a demonstration of what his universal, all pervading form is. He is seen in and through his creation. In the beginning, he enjoys because he shows the positive side of creation. But when he shows the terrible side of creation, because it can't be that God pervades only the good side. Though we wish God is always good and always everything ends happily ever after, and all those things are stories. But Sri Krishna shows him the Vishwarupa. He says, are you capable? I'll give you the divine vision, Divya Chakshu, you will see it. But then when he comes to the second part of the Vishwarupa, if you see, in the beginning he shows how he is pervading everything. Anything that is great, in and through, I am pervading. So that is what is described from 13 to 15. It's just a sort of recapitulation of what Vishwarupa is. But when he comes to the horrible form, the form that not only creates, but that form that kills everything and destroys everything, because he is the Kala. If he can create something, he is the one who can destroy it. So when it comes to the destructive side, Arjuna says, I had enough now. You please take back your original form as Krishna, as the Parthasarathi. I would rather see you in that form. I was curious to see the Vishwarupa, but this truth is too much for me. So here also something similar. He says, Sarvatah Panipadam Tat Sarvato Kshishiro Mukham Sarvatah Shrutimal Loke Sarvam Avrutya Tishtati. So this is simple. He says this is there in the Purusha Sukta of Vedas. When we chant the Purusha Sukta, it is the same thing. The Supreme Purusha, the immanent God, which is seen everywhere. This is a vision that the sadhaka has before the salt doll melts, before he becomes one, intuitively becomes immortal by being one with Brahman. He says, with hands and feet everywhere, that is Sarvataha Panipadam, hands and feet. Tat Sarvata Akshir Shira Mukham. Akshi means with eyes and head and mouth everywhere. That means the universal being. Everywhere you see a mouth, you see an eye, you see that all-pervading God. That is the intuitive realization of the all-pervading immanent God. Sarvata Shrutimal Loke means he is. They say there are some nice descriptions in the Quran and even the Bible. He hears the footfall of the ant. So he has sharp ears which listen to every sound. That is how the immanent God is explained in other scriptures also. Because they start with the idea that God is not only the ruler, but he is present everywhere. There's nowhere that there's no Allah or there is no for my Father in heaven, though people have an understanding that he will be only in heaven, but he is everywhere, because that heaven, according to the Bible, is within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So he is within, he is without. So the same idea is there in all the scriptures. But here he says, with hands and feet everywhere, Sarvata Panipadam Tat Sarvata Akshishira Akshishira Mukham means eye. Akshi means eye and mouth. With eyes and head and mouth. Shira is head and mouth. So everywhere you see that immanent God through every mouth, through every eye. That means that personal presence, the personal God which is immanent everywhere. Loke, in this world. Sarvam avrutya. By having enveloped the whole world, he exists. He exists enveloping all. So he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, when do you see this type of, when do you have this kind of intuitive experience? When there is a slight trace of the ego. Because if the ego completely merges, if there is a smallest trace of egoism in me, I see Ishvara as the owner of the universe and all the beings in it as part of that whole reality. Because I still have the ego that I am part of that. So it's like something like Vishishtadvaita, where you are not being one with the ultimate reality. You just, the step below that, he says, as long as that little trace of egoism is there, I see this Ishvara. Actually, we begin our sadhana with that. We try to first see him in the different creation as an immanent God before we transcend. Transcendence is not so easy. Now, the second verse, uh, we literally get the feeling. That's what Bhakta says when he says, talks about Sharanagati. There are so many Bengali songs which say that you are the master of the chariot and I am the chariot. So you make me move as you do. There's so many songs of uh, great poets where they feel that he is the world mover and we are just puppets being moving in this universe according to his will. That is the idea you get. So then he says, Sarvendriya गुणाभासम सर्वेन्द्रिय विवर्जितम असक्तम सर्व मृत्यैव निर्गुणम गुणभोक्तृ च. Now, here still we have the feeling that ego is still there. Sarva indriya guna abhasam means shining. How do you know that the consciousness exists? Because it shines through all the organs. Somebody within shines through our eyes, shines through all the other indriyas, and we see a sentient universe. We are not like stones. We are like conscious. Some consciousness is peeping out, shining by the functions of all the senses. The senses give us an impression of the consciousness within. Sarva indriya vivarjitam, but at the same time, that consciousness does not need the indriyas. That consciousness can exist without the indriyas. That is why I say sarvendriya vivarjitam, which is without the senses, unattached, asaktam. That is the greatest sadhana. In fact, as I told you many times, when Mahatma Gandhi read the Bhagavad Gita, he was asked, he wrote his own. Everybody who reads the Gita interprets his interprets the Gita in his own way. There are some people, for example, when Bal Gangadhar Tilak wrote the Gita Rahasya, he explained the whole thing as Karma Rahasya. He says the whole of Gita is speaking only of Karma Yoga. That is his attitude or that is his reading of the Gita. So others will say Gita speaks only of Bhakti Yoga. Everywhere the universal God is worshipped. So a devotee will say in Gita, he says only Bhakti. That is what most of the Bhakti schools do. They believe in a Krishna and they believe only in a personal God. They don't want to become impersonal. And they say any other interpretation is wrong. So that is everybody wants to explain the Gita uh, through his own understanding. So that is why we find and Mahatma Gandhi, on the other hand, he did not see a personal God, he did not see transcendence, he did not see Brahma Vidya. He says the only idea I liked, and his whole commentary was named as Anasakti Yoga. He says, what I learned from Gita is what Sri Krishna lived. In fact, this is not Gandhiji's view, it is Swami Vivekananda who, for the first time, pointed out. He said, if you read the Gita, the best commentary is the life of Krishna. What is the life of Krishna? Without the life of Krishna, we cannot understand the philosophy of Gita. So he is the best commentary on his own teachings. Obviously, that is true. He spoke from his own experience. So what was the experience which Vivekananda saw and also Mahatma Gandhi saw? He named it Anasakti Yoga. Just like Tilak wanted to he liked the Karma Yoga part, the fighting part. So you should fight. This world is a battlefield and you have to fight. So Karma Yoga is what, that is partially true. Everything is partially true. But some people, like Swami Vivekananda, also believed that the greatest message of Bhagavad Gita is the detachment or unattached, asaktam. That is why he says this Brahman is asakta. It's not connected with good or evil. It appears to be connected with good, following dharma and adharma. That is why at the end of the Gita, he says, Sarva dharman parityajya, means adharma and dharma, everything you give up and surrender to me. Mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami ma sochaha. So, at the end of everything, comparing the dualities, Sri Krishna is simply withdrawing. And still, Swami Vivekananda, in his beautiful talks on the Gita, he says, if you see, the one quality which Krishna had was he was not attached to anyone, not even to his own parents. Parents, he was separated. He goes to live with his Yashoda, who loved him so much. And then he leaves that Gokula and goes and settles somewhere in Dwarka. Then he goes to Vrindavan. And he has such wonderful relationship with the gopis. He was hardly 13 years old, and the gopis, they were all having children, somewhere of them married. But they had so much deep love for this young child. And at the age of 13, he leaves Vrindavan and never returns back. He's totally detached. Wherever he goes, he does his job in a very unattached way. Even the battle of Mahabharata, he was not attached to anyone. He said, I will not take part in the war. Though he guided Arjuna, everything is fine. But the main purpose was he was asaktam. Asaktam means unattached. So that detachment or that non-attachment or anasakti, which is the word Gandhi used to explain, was a characteristic of Krishna. So Swami Vivekananda says, see that great personality, lived for more than 100 years. And everywhere he went, everybody felt that Krishna is one's own, but he himself was not bound by anything. Nowhere you will find Krishna. Imagine, the age of 13, he leaves Vrindavan. He never visits Vrindavan in his whole life. These things Swami Vivekananda observes. And he says, that is why he says here that though he shines through the functions of all the senses, the all-pervading reality, he is detached. If God is affected, if God is attached, then there is a problem, because his immortality is because he is not attached to things that perish. So if God is attached, he will perish. If he perishes, he is not God, he is not the immortal self. That is the idea that is conveyed. He says, Nirgunam is devoid of gunas also. Gunas apply to us. Because gunas apply to us, we have tamasic guna, we have rajasic guna, we are active, we are dull, or we are noble, that is sattvic guna. But he is detached. He has no preferences. He is equal to all. I mean, equal in the sense he is detached with all, whether one is a... that's why when in the Vishwarupa, he did not show only the sattvic aspect of the Lord. He showed the terrible tamasic destructive aspect. And he was just laughing in the sense Sri Krishna was showing truth as it is. The world as it is, without any taking sides with evil or destruction or creation, not siding with anyone. But the problem was Arjuna's mind. His mind was not prepared to see the terrible. He did not want to see the consequences of the destruction that would take place. He even showed who are the people who are going to die, and such bloodshed. Even before the war, it was a horrible scene. And he was totally detached. Even after the war, if you read the Mahabharata, you'll get a very clear idea, because that describes the life of Krishna. It's just taking a few wonderful or pleasant incidents from his life will not give an idea of what kind of personality he was. His life was not smooth. If you see, right from day one, he's suffering. He was deprived from his biological parents. He was born in jail, and then you imagine, never could mix with them. And the people who really loved him, the foster mother Yashoda, he had to be separated from her. He had to be separated from the gopis. He had to separated from some of the dear friends whom he saw killing each other, the cousins killing each other in the horrible Mahabharata war. Some of the children of Pandavas, most of them died. So everywhere he was totally detached. So one of the qualities he says here, asaktam sarva brut. Though he is detached, he is supporting everyone, good, bad, everything. Nirgunam is devoid of gunas, but he is also guna bhoktru. So it's a little paradoxical. So shining by the functions of all the sense organs, yet without acting, capable of acting without the sense organs, absolute yet sustaining all, devoid of gunas, yet he experiences them. So it is the example that is given is that sunlight, sunlight, though it is white, when it passes through the prism of Maya, it will become different colors. That is the idea behind Holi. Holi represents different colors which are subsumed in the universal color. It should lead to the white color which separates itself into different forms. Apparently, sunlight, any light passing through the prism appears to be separated, the different transparency, different colors. So sunlight itself is not with any form and color. It is unattached due to this modification. Just as pure light, it shines on good and bad things. It is impartial. So that is the example. The Chaitanya or consciousness which is within, which is to be realized, is the characteristics of the Atman and plays a role similar to that of sunlight. It does not distinguish between good and bad. It just lights up all the senses and aids the sense organs to function according to their characteristic. The eyes will see, the ears will hear. So this Brahman or the absolute awareness, which is beyond Kshetra and Kshetrajna, is known as Chidakasha. That is the consciousness, pure consciousness. It is the screen. It is like a screen. That's why it said it is like a substratum. Though we need a screen on which the film is projected. So that film can be projected and appreciated and seen only if there is a screen. Though screen has no role to play. You may go and touch when the movie is over, when the projection is removed or stopped. The screen just appears in its true nature. Whereas when it is dark and the light falls on that, then a whole drama appears on that very screen, which is neutral, which is detached. So but still, you can't say the screen. He is the support, though he is detached. So it's a very paradoxical thing Sri Krishna is telling. And in the 15th verse, we'll see how he clarifies why it appears like that. Similarly, the three gunas, they are in Prakriti, they are not in Brahman. They are in Prakriti and they shine in all their colors, provided the consciousness is there. So he peeks through those consciousness and at the same time he is not attached. He is beyond gunas. So Sri Ramakrishna in his gospel, he gives the same example. He says both God with form, because this was a new idea. The Brahmo Samaj followers, they believed that all the root cause of all religious wars and conflict in India and even abroad, the religious wars, is because we believe in God with form, because there is image worship. So he believed and they believed and they said, if you stop worshipping God with form, then all the quarrels will cease. Not knowing that it is not because of the gods. Gods don't quarrel among themselves. It is the followers of the gods that quarrel. They said, my God is superior or your God, let us decide. Let us fight and decide whose God is superior. So that is the idea. It's not the gods who quarrel, unfortunately. Any idea of God is noble enough. You can live with 100 ideas of God simultaneously. There's no issue. The problem is with the human mind. So He was the first time he said, why do you criticize somebody if he thinks the God is in the image, is in the temple or in the church or somewhere? Why do you say, how do you know he's only formless? He is with form, he is without form. The form also belongs to the same God. That is what this verse says. He is with gunas, but at the same time detached from the gunas. He is passing, he is percolating through the senses, that same consciousness, but he can live without the senses, don't need. The consciousness is not depending on the senses, whereas the senses depend on consciousness to behind it. It's like the light, the screen, and all the things that appear. They are dependent on the light. Light is not dependent on them. That is the idea. The sun and the sunbeams that you see are inseparable. It is like trying to separate fire and its heating property. So God without form and God with form is like fire and its burning property. They cannot be separated. I can't have a fire without its burning property. I can't have milk and its whiteness. When you say milk, the whiteness automatically comes. They are inseparable. Similarly, Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman are one and the same. It is not possible to conceive of one to the exclusion of other. That is what Sri Ramakrishna explains, uh, maybe as if commenting on this verse, though he said it in some other context, not quoting this. And the last 15th verse I'll just discuss. We don't have much time. So I'll just give the translation. In the next class, we'll start from this particular verse, because this is the last verse of the three verses which describe God as both transcendent, pure consciousness, and that which we see in and through the mind, through our mind in the world around us. So, what is the next verse? Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charamevacha sukshmatvat sukshmatvat tat avigneyam durastham cha antike cha tat. Without and within all beings. He is outside of everything, but at the same time, he is inside also. It is like Sri Ramakrishna is to give the example of a pot, which is when you immerse it in water, water is outside the pot and inside the pot. So if the pot thinks that the water inside is the only water that exists, it is wrong, because there is water outside the pot. It is immersed. So he is without and within all beings, just as water is within the pot, or space is there within the pot and outside the pot, and also in the pot, the material of the pot, the unmoving and also the moving. Because of his subtlety, he is incomprehensible. Because he is subtle, the moment you try to see him in the moving, then what about the unmoving? He is behind that also. There is that famous uh, song, Sufi song or Sufi saying, where the Sufi saint sees the same consciousness everywhere. The popular idea is that animate objects are the only conscious beings. The stone and the uh, soil and other things, water and all, they are unconscious. That was the idea. But a true Gyani, he sees the consciousness percolating both through moving and unmoving. Chara, achara, both. In that which moves, chara means moves, acharam, immoving, that is animate and inanimate objects. So the Sufi saint, because Sufism is very close, though it is a tradition of Islam, it has borrowed lot of ideas from Vedanta, and it's a nice harmonious mixture of Vedanta and uh, Islam. So there in the Sufi saint says that God exists. God, the consciousness, he doesn't say God, for them consciousness is everything, just as in Vedanta. He says consciousness is active in moving things or animals and human beings. The same consciousness becomes, it quivers. It's not fully conscious like in animals, in vegetation or uh, the plants and the trees, and where consciousness is there, but compared to animals, it is much more restricted. So it quivers. But he says, I also say I see the consciousness in the stone. It is static. So it appears to be static, but all the same, there is consciousness. So he is conscious both in the moving and non moving objects. So the distinction which Western philosophy makes is inanimate and animate. They think consciousness is only in the animate world, the plants, the trees, they feel. But of course, some scientists now, when they go into the quantum world, they call it an observer based reality. The observer becomes very important. You can't just ignore the subject. So what you see outside, it gets its relevance, or it gets its importance from how you define the observer. So they say observer based reality. You can't just say it is reality. If the observer changes, the reality also changes. So it's in a constant state of flux. So that shows that this consciousness, though it is an attribute of living beings and living plants, it is also there in inanimate objects. That is the idea which is given here, and which uh, corresponds to the latest discoveries of quantum physics. Because physics is, they when they try to find out what is it that makes matter what it is, and what it is that which makes energy what it is. Can we distinguish when we can say certain thing is matter, or where is the distinction between inanimate and animate objects? Where is the distinction? What is consciousness? These are all very serious problems, even from the point of view of science. When you go deep enough, they are totally incomprehensible. That is why he says this Nirguna Brahman, this idea of pure awareness, remains incomprehensible to those who have not purified the mind. To the ignorant one, God is far away, somewhere in heaven, but to the knowing one, none is nearer than God, he being the innermost self. That is what uh, if you read the Bible, a section of people will believe that our Father in heaven. So the very idea that when you read this, you feel heaven is somewhere outside of us. But if you see the subsequent sentences, he says the kingdom of heaven, if at all there is a kingdom of heaven, it is within you. So how can it be within and it can be away from you, somewhere away in heaven? So it is near and at the same time far. It is very difficult to comprehend, as modern science very clearly shows that the uncertainty principle itself tells that it is so difficult to predict whether uh, something is material. It remains material for some time, and depending on the observer, it changes its location, its velocity, and then it appears to be non material, it appears to be energy. So there is so much that is incomprehensible which is going on in this, even this Prakriti. When we claim at a macro level, at the macrocosmic level, physics can explain many things. But when you go deeper into even secular science, physics, chemistry, and other things, when you go deeper at the microcosmic level, it becomes more and more uncertain, more and more unpredictable. As he says, it remains incomprehensible. That is why he says the word used is durastham avigneyam. It, by the very reason that it is changing all the time, it is avigneyam. It is not known, as it is unknowable, and is appears to be far, but at the same time it is near. So we'll discuss this, how the cosmic consciousness shows these paradoxes in our life, and how it is incomprehensible. Uh, we can see later on. There are many examples Sri Ramakrishna gave, made these things apparently difficult philosophical problems very simple by his example of ice and water. He gives many examples, so we'll discuss it in the next class. Are there any questions? Anybody? Yeah, some time. 5 minutes, huh? Yes. Hmm. Yeah, I said, see, the thing is, when we see the colors, we see variety, we see change, we see so many things, but they are made of the primary color. I think you know in the law of physics, when plain light, which has no color of its own, passes through a prism, that's how they demonstrate the Vibgyor, Vibgyor, yellow, and all these colors. They appear to be split into different colors. So that is used as an example. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna uses that. I don't know whether he was taken to a laboratory because this is not very apparent. Only it is apparent if you see the rainbow. Rainbow, that somehow that prism effect is created and you see the four different colors, though the light has no color. So that is how explained. That explains the idea that why Maya looks so colorful when there is that unity behind that. So the unity in diversity, that is the idea. Actually, it is given to explain that light, though it is a unified white color, it appears to be, it separates itself in different colors. That is the idea. No, one of the reasons, yes, yes. If you go to the actually we love color, we love variety, isn't it? Because our minds are so colorful, we want change. Same thing if you ask a person to just sit and repeat the name of God, he will not do it. He wants change. He wants rapid change. Even children, poor children, they are exposed to so much of change. They change the channels, they change everything. If you succeed in making the child sit quietly for 1 hour or even half an hour or 10 minutes, it's a great achievement. He will become a genius. But unfortunately, we give so many toys, we give so much of variety because the child loves color. That's a natural tendency. And we hypnotize that poor child into thinking that variety is good. But the more distraction there is, the more less concentrated his mind is. And though Holy says that color is the very spice of life, people don't see through it that the whole color comes from uh, a being who is beyond variety. So the idea is all the things, diversity that we see around us should lead us to that unity. That is the aim of all our festivals. Unfortunately, now we are happy with diversity. We don't want unity. That's why we find instead of making festivals, making our mind calm, peaceful, concentrated, it is increasing our disturbance. I mean, mental disturbance, in fact, increases after these functions because they have been reduced to mere social events. Because if religious significance is explained, then it will not be colorful. And we are used to color. We are not happy with one channel. We want to change channel every 5 minutes. Even a child, if you see, if he becomes so restless, then we give different names. ADHD, that is a very common name now. Anything happens, the child is suffering from ADHD, hyper activity. It's a disorder actually. Now they have realized that diversity can be a disorder. Attention deficiency, which is the result of hyperactivity disorder. So hyperactivity means going after more colors. What happens is you lose your focus. So through the prism, if you take the reverse path, the four colors come and light, if it is one pointed, it can be used. The concentrated mind. Now you all of a sudden the child is exposed to diversity, and suddenly you tell him, now you sit and study maths or study this. He says, no, I can't make my mind, I can't see unity now because I want diversity. 5 minutes I'll study maths, 5 minutes I'll watch TV, 5 minutes I will do. So that diversity has become to reduce the diversity, and diversity should lead to unity. That should be the goal of all our festivals. But unfortunately, we have let go of unity and are focusing more on diversity. The more the diversity, we think the more grand the festival is. If this time, if you spend the Ganesh Utsavs and all you see, the bigger the pandals, the bigger the money spent, and people think that, oh, they see, we are far superior than that pendal. And the Durga Puja also, it's the same thing everywhere. There's a competition how diverse we can be, isn't it? Diversity is not bad, but the goal behind these festivals is all the diverse people come together and try to find out whether there is something that can unite us rather than divide us. So that is the idea. But unfortunately, for that, you need to have a very clear idea of what these spiritual festivals really, the deeper meaning behind that. Even Diwali is like that. Yeah.
Said that the knowledge of Brahman arises in the mind, but the mind is also a product of Maya.
Yeah.
And how does it work?
It doesn't arise in the mind, it is through the mind. See, the thing is, the effort you make to get that Unitarian knowledge of unity, it is the only instrument that you have right now is mind. This mind, if you see, that is why whole of yoga is defined as Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Chitta Vrittis are more. Suppose today you have 100 Vrittis. 100 Vrittis going in different direction. And you are not peaceful. If what yoga says is just reduce that Vrittis, Nirodha means to control. Control the Vrittis, make it 10. Say what happened, or not 100, from 100 go to 90. So using whatever method, prayer, then you will find you get some peace. But don't stop. That is why all the 8 steps are there. Dharana, dhyana. You start with asana. First of all, we have to make the body restful. It is restless. So asana's main thing is you get sthirata. Sthirata means that which makes you physically steady. Mentally you forget. Mentally it is very difficult. Mind will go on bubbling up, and the more it thinks of diversity, it gets uncertainty. All these things trouble you. Uncertainties. Most of our thoughts are based on uncertainty. Anxiety is, what is anxiety? It is some uncertainty which we are, some future thing which may not happen, we are bringing into the present and thinking it may happen. Oh, I may lose money, what security I have to do this, I have to do that. Most of them are uncertain things which you are bringing into the present. So vrittis increase. So vrittis, when they decrease, you will find that the concentration improves. I mean, the lesser the vrittis, it helps. So that's the idea. So this mind is the only instrument which we have to attain that unity. The mind can make you diverse, go towards diversity, if you give it a freedom to do whatever it likes. The same mind can be used to go inward, and that is to go towards one. So mind is an important role, though it isn't just an instrument, but it's definitely something that you need, because you can't do it through body. That is why the steps start from yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. Even breath will not help you. People say, na, just watching the breath, you can improve your focus. It will help. It will help. It will help control the prana. Then it will help control the body, the sense organs. But after that, you all the other 4 steps, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, all the 4 steps of yoga, half of them deal with the mind only. So yoga is mostly a mental exercise. Physical is 1/8. 1/8 is physical, but we start with that. Obviously, we need that. Because unless the body is steady, unless the prana is controlled to some extent, so you do pranayama, breathing, just observing the breath, awareness, and try to have awareness in the breathing. Otherwise, if you leave it free, the prana will cause havoc in our personality. So, but still, as you asked, the mind is important. You can't just go beyond the mind. You have to completely use the mind, because the mind has brought you to this disturbed state. So the same mind has to withdraw and go back and take you to a peaceful state. So mind works both ways. That is why we can't ignore. It is through the mind we created this problem. Isn't it? Our mind, because we could not, we just gave it freedom to do whatever it likes. Now, it's like Sri Ramakrishna is to give, yeah, no, fine. I mean, I think I have answered you. Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying you have to be bad. No, no, no. It works because, see, the thing is, ultimately you have to accept that the world is full of. You can't expect a utopian world where everybody will be good. It would be dream-like. It's good to dream that everybody will be my. Everybody with whom I come in contact should be good to me. That's nice as a dream. But in reality, it is not true. So the sooner you accept the harsh truth that this whole world is at the best a mixture of good and evil. So if the 50 people are good, there will be 50 bad people. So instead of getting disillusioned, if you accept that truth, that is what Gita says. You have to go beyond good and evil. Only because, not that you don't have to be good, you have to first conquer. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of a thorn. He says, if a thorn has stuck your foot, you need another thorn to remove it. But then after removing that thorn, you don't put the good thorn inside. You have to throw that also. So I'm not saying you give up the good, you do good till it removes the bad in you. It's all subjective. You cannot remove the bad from the world, no matter how much you try. That is how the world is. World is not going to change because we can become good. We can increase the uh, sattva within us, but we can't expect everybody else to follow. No matter how much we wish, we want all the people with whom we come in contact should be good. Our children should be good. Our grandchildren should be good. That would be ideal, but it won't happen. No, even if you manage, it won't. That's the problem. That's the uh, problem with the world. If somebody hopes for it, it's good to hope, but it is like hoping the impossible. By very nature, the world is a mixture of good and evil. You see, Mahabharata also, today also, any age, you show me one age where everybody was good. There was no quarrel at all. Ramayana also, they were good and bad. So they are just these novels, not novels, these great uh, itihasas, they call it. They are reflection of reality. They are not just novels that somebody has written. In novel, you can write anything. You can write that everybody and everything is good in that. The characters are imaginary. You create in that novel, perhaps you can have a novel where everybody does only good. There's not a single bad person, but that is uh, imaginary. That is why they don't call this Mahabharata and especially Mahabharata as a novel. They say it is itihasa. Itihasa means the way it happened. The way Mahabharata happened, they have just stated the statement of facts. They have not taken sides. Said if there were Pandavas, there were Kauravas, though they may be cousins. So the story repeats. Yeah, it's subjective. It's subjective. That's the whole story behind Mahabharata. You see Yudhishthira's life. People thought he was a fool. That is what most of the people will tell you. If you are good, you are foolish, isn't it? Oh, there is a Hindi nice short story. You know Hindi. हाँ, बेचारा भला आदमी है लेकिन वो बेचारा है. Very story is like that. And the whole story shows that because he was good, he always suffered. There is truth in that. That is why they say Bechara Bhala Admi. I don't know. That- No, the thing is, suffered from your point of view is suffering, but if he is happy, then what is your problem? Yudhishthira was happy. Though you thought it is suffering, he never told untruth as far as possible, he did not. Everybody thought he was a fool. People should have been like Bhim or Arjun. Everybody has a choice. said you should give tit for tat.
So strength is more important than goodness.
Yes,
Be strong.
strength. Be strong. Yeah, strength is, see, good and bad, they are relative terms. So if like Trump says you have to be good to America, then you will be bad to somebody else. You can't be good to the whole world. If you say America first or India first, then second somebody will be second. So it is good for Americans, but what may be good for Americans may not be good for the other world people. We have to choose, and yeah, that's why I said good and bad is relative. So we have to. It's a that's why they said our scriptures always point to a reality which is beyond goodness and evil, good and evil. They said they are eternal problems. By very nature, the world is a mixture of good and evil. It is vain to imagine that it will be either totally good or totally bad. It will always be a mixture. Some places it may be more good, more, but the balance keeps on changing. Because it changes, because it is temporary, because it is there is no solution in this world, we go take to spirituality and find our solution in God, who is beyond good and bad. There is no solution in good and bad. You will either be good or you side with the bad. If you are strong, you will side with the good, and you have to suffer. You have to suffer, and if you side with the bad, you may suffer less, but then that is what it is. So it is powers of bad people come together much easier than good people. Good people are divided. That is why the world suffers. So it is the very nature of world. There's nothing to be surprised about. It's an eternal story repeating itself. It was there in Mahabharata, it was there in Kali Yuga, all yugas it was almost same. It just changes. The people change, the geography changes, the races change. But good and evil coexist. They will coexist eternally in this world. So the solution given by spirituality is go beyond the world, which is go after God. Not a solution given by Indian spiritual tradition. All spiritual traditions ask you to go beyond good and evil. Christ and all prophets say the same thing. Yeah. Yes. Yes. No. Rising above good is good, but first you have to rise above evil also. Huh? Gunas. Yes. Three gunas. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, you definitely not worry because the gunas will do its job. Prakriti does it's there in the Gita, na? Prakriti does its own job depending on the gunas, based on the gunas. But you have to transcend the gunas. The whole challenge of whole Gita is anasakti, as I said. You detach yourself from everything. And only when you detach, you attach yourself to God, and then that is the only permanent solution. Other solutions are temporary. Winning the Mahabharata war was a temporary solution. They defeated, Dharma will prevail against adharma. So that's why that battle was necessary. And after that, Krishna himself tells in the last chapter, Sarva Dharman Parityaja. You follow Dharma, but then give up that Dharma also and come to me. Come to me means come to God, ultimate reality.